hunter's cap and black shirt. Suspect should be considered armed and dangerous.
At 4:50 p.m. on August 1st, 2014, a Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputy spotted an escaped suspect in the vicinity of a quiet family neighborhood in Pico Rivera. The man, a known gang member, had been on the run since escaping police custody a week earlier. The wanted bulletin issued to all Pico Rivera station personnel was clear. The suspect should be considered armed and dangerous. Fleeing from officers once again, the armed and wanted man escaped into the backyard of the Mendoza family home. Mr. Mendoza's son, Frank Jr., heard their dogs growling and went to see what all the commotion was about. Shocked to see the armed man standing there, seemingly strung out and demanding to be hidden, Frank Jr. rushed around the side of the house and gave two deputies, who were already standing in the driveway, a description of the man. He then led the deputies into the house through the front door, directly into the living room, where his father, Frank Sr., shielded his scared grandchildren. They passed Frank Jr.'s mother, Lorraine, in the hallway. Instead of evacuating the family to safety, the deputies left the house and the entire family on their own with an armed and wanted felon in their backyard. That's when Frank Jr. heard a crash coming from the back of the house. Instinctively, he ran to the bedroom. As the armed man broke through the window, Frank Jr. shouted, "He's coming in!" Realizing that his daughter had followed him, Frank Jr. quickly grabbed her and swept her into the hall. That's when two deputies at the front door ordered him to get out. Frank Jr. escaped with his children and dogs and retreated to the police cars in front of the house. His father and mother, who struggled to walk, were still inside. The suspect charged out of the bedroom, opening fire on the deputies in the living room. A bullet fragment ricocheted and hit Lorraine in the face. Terrified, she struggled into the bathroom, locked the door, and hid in the tub. In the chaos, Frank Mendoza Sr. rushed through the open door of his home. One of the sheriff's deputies, allegedly fearing for his life, mistook Frank Sr. for the wanted suspect and fired his gun. Frank Sr. fell, shot once in the leg and once in the head. Frank Mendoza Sr., 54, father, grandfather, a well-respected member of the community, on the verge of retirement, was pronounced dead at the scene by paramedics. Unaware of her husband's death, Lorraine remained trapped in their home, where the armed felon terrorized her, threatening to mutilate and kill her. It took 8 hours before the tactical unit could breach the property to rescue her, shooting and killing the wanted man when they did. Tragically, for Lorraine Mendoza and her family, this was not the end.
They didn't want to accept responsibility. They wanted to blame everybody but themselves.
Garo Martirosyan and Armin Akaragian took the Mendoza family's case in 2015 and immediately filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the County of Los Angeles. Faced with proving that the testimony provided by the deputy who shot Frank Mendoza was embellished, the attorneys had a huge task ahead of them, as well as a lot of concerns about the events as they occurred the year before. There was the officers' failure to contain a dangerous gang member, their negligence in failing to evacuate the Mendoza family, and the shooting deputy's hastiness in firing, despite Frank's significant difference in appearance from the wanted suspect. But their biggest concern was the department's claim that their deputy did nothing wrong. The shooting deputy had reviewed the wanted bulletin. That same deputy had also seen Frank Sr. when they were inside the property. How did that deputy, without seeing a firearm, mistake Frank for somebody 30 years younger and 50 pounds lighter? For Garo and Armin, something didn't add up. The deputy had fired 2 rounds from his 9mm Smith & Wesson semi-automatic service weapon.
Any officer in a situation where you're under stress, there are people evacuating a house, can make a mistake of shooting the wrong individual.
But the casings, as far as the lawyers were concerned, should have been where he said he was standing, on the Mendoza's front lawn, in immediate danger.
We asked him, "Where were you standing, deputy?" And he put a circle where he was standing. We said, "Wait a minute. If you're standing there, how come the casings from your gun were all the way out 30 feet away in the next door neighbor's driveway?" And they said, "Well, that's how these casings fly out of these automatic pistols."
Those 2 bullet casings changed everything. The attorneys had reconstructed the scene using 3D models, but they wanted to test the gun used. The LA Sheriff's Department didn't want to give them the gun.
What we had to do was not just get an exemplar pistol and shoot and see how far those casings fly, but we wanted the specific pistol.
It took multiple back and forth motions, but the judge ruled that the lawyers had a right to let their own experts test the exact weapon used by the deputy.
But they wouldn't just hand it to us. They wouldn't just drop it off. They wanted to hand it to us at the range. Not just any sheriff's deputy, but the deputy that actually did the killing, that actually fired the gun, wanted to hand me the gun that day.
Armin called it highly unusual. Not only that the sheriff's department had made it so difficult for them to get the gun, and that the shooting deputy wanted to be present at the range, but the department didn't want to release the internal investigation notes either.
We showed up at a firing range. There were like 20 of us out there, many sheriff's deputies, lots of lawyers, our expert, and we measured where those bullet casings go. And we were able to show that those casings don't fly any more than about 6 to 8 feet from the pistol. They don't fly 30 feet.
Did the deputy outright lie, or was he mistaken about where he was standing? Garrow and Armin argued that he had no reason to fire his gun because whoever was coming out of Frank Mendoza's front door that day could not have been a threat at that distance.
So you were not in harm's way. You did not have to shoot. You could have waited. You could have taken cover.
But there was something else that had caught Armin's attention.
What was most troubling to me about this case was what happened in the hour leading up to Mr. Mendoza getting shot.
The deputy had lied about where he was standing. What else was being covered up? Armin had a feeling that there was something in the internal investigations report that the LA Sheriff's Department didn't want them to see. California law has changed since then, but in 2015, internal affairs reports were private, and the LASD refused to release the Mendoza investigation report to the attorneys without a court order. Garrow and Armin didn't give up. They pursued every legal avenue to compel its release. Finally, the judge held that certain portions of the report could be disclosed, including the officer's observations. The LASD produced it in its entirety.
They gave me like a 1,000-page report. They figured maybe I won't review it, but I review everything, and it was buried in there.
What Armin discovered in that report was the most unsettling of all. The deputies shouldn't have been at Frank Mendoza's house in the first place. An innocent man shouldn't have died. A family didn't have to suffer that loss. Armin discovered that in the hour before Frank Sr.'s shooting, the deputies had initially gone to the home of the suspect's girlfriend. She lived in the house behind the Mendoza family. The wanted man was there. The LASD knew he was there. Yet the sheriff's department tried to cover up the fact that the suspect didn't just randomly run to Frank Mendoza's house. He was forced there by deputies. In that hour before Frank Mendoza was shot, the deputies went to the home of the suspect's girlfriend. They went around the side where they spotted him in the window, and like a couple of cowboys, they door-knocked the house. The 24-year-old man was a parolee at large. His face was on a wanted poster. The deputies spooked him, so he did what any armed suspect might do. He fled. The 2 deputies should have called it in. At the very least, they should have covered the house or tried to calm the suspect. Instead, they decided to be heroes. They tried to take him into custody by themselves, despite knowing they had a dedicated team with expertise in containment and apprehension.
You had all the way to contain him in the house he was in. Instead, you spooked him. You have a special team that actually takes care of doing that. Just call it in and keep eyes on the house until the special team contains the yard.
The sheriff's deputies didn't follow protocol. Instead, they door-knocked the front of the house and the suspect fled out of the back door, over the wall, and dropped right onto Frank Mendoza's property. For Armin, this was the true crime. Garrow and Armin had a strong case and were ready to take it to court. They were confident that a jury would rule in the family's favor, but their priority is always to ensure a better life for the people they represent. This tragedy, Frank Sr.'s wife being taken hostage and terrorized, his son and grandchildren witnessing his death at the hands of the LASD, the impact of their loss, it had all taken a huge emotional and psychological toll on them and the entire family. Understandably, they couldn't face the gut-wrenching ordeal of a trial.
The money doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? I would take my father over anything. He will never die. He will always live, through us.
Hi, Fullerton Police, sir.
I've a creepy homeless guy that looks like Jesus. His name's Kelly, roaming the parking lot.
All right, we'll send somebody out.